All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everybody's having a great conference. I'm Manny Simons. I have the honor of welcoming Karen Aiach to this fireside chat. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you very much.
Karen is the CEO of Genespire, founding executive member of the International Rare Disease Research Consortium. I would like you to tell us a little bit about that, but maybe before we get into this, tell us a little bit about your just personal journey to the space of rare disease gene therapy development. Each of us comes at this from a unique place, and I think that'd just be a great place for us to begin the conversation today.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Manny. So that's really nice to be with you all today. So my journey in the space of gene therapy is a little bit personal and spatial. 20 years ago, I didn't know about gene therapy at all. And since then, I've been doing gene therapy only. So I had my first child in 2005, and it happened, unfortunately, that she was diagnosed with Sanfilippo syndrome type A, otherwise known as mucopolysaccharidosis type 3A. And back at that time, there was little work in the gene therapy space for this disease. And so to make a long story short, I started my own program, which then turned into a company and then a listed company called Lysogene. And this is when I started gene therapy with an AAV-based platform developed within Lysogene to develop programs for rare neurodegenerative pediatric diseases. And today, even though I'm presenting as the CEO of Genespire, I still have the chance to pursue this program on Sanfilippo A with the hat of a not-for-profit organization, and that program is currently in phase 3 in the US and in Europe.
And for those who do not know or aren't familiar with Karen's background, online there's an excellent, it's a very short video doing the impossible, which I think is a great description of what you had to look at coming into this area, and I'm sure still informs how you approach the space today. So given the background that you had coming in, the roles that you have now, I'd love to hear you share with us, what are, you have to interact with so many different stakeholders throughout and many of them are not experts in gene therapy, many of them are not experts in rare disease drug development. What are some of the areas that you feel are underappreciated in that broader community that you wish there was more attention drawn to?
Yes, so I think that one of the benefits for me of not being an expert in gene therapy or in biotech companies when I started was that I came pretty much unbiased with skills that were not scientific, but other types of skills that are highly needed for drug development. And amongst them, I was already very interested and passionate about having different stakeholders acting together towards the same objective. And I think that was probably missing at the time when I started, at least for this disease of Sanfilippo syndrome. And so, again, with a very unbiased approach, I started to meet with all the relevant players in that space, so starting with the scientists, the clinicians, and quite rapidly with patient organizations, and then with regulatory people. As a patient rep back then in 2008 and 2009, I had the privilege to serve on the pediatric committee of the European Medicines Agency, which gave me a pretty strong and deep perspective on how the regulatory agencies were appreciating what we were doing and how they were assessing the programs. And that gave a first bias, which was to really pay a strong attention on regulatory expectations and derive benefit from their knowledge, because as regulatory agencies, obviously they have access to all the programs that aims at entering into the clinic. And it gives them a very, very strong and deep expertise that if we enter into sound and early dialogue with them, can be of great benefit for the companies because we can learn from them as well. So this was my first discovery, entering into that space, that the regulatory affairs were a driving force within the company rather than a supporting type of functions. And second, of course, coming from being a family member with a child with a rare disease, I paid particular attention to my own situation and that of the other families with this disease. And I was at the really very forefront of, I was really able to describe and to identify, describe, formalize, and use the knowledge on this disease, which was already there in a certain way in many different publications, but there was a lack in patient perspective in what, as I could see, others were doing, not necessarily in Sanfilippo syndrome, because there was hardly no clinical research for that disease, but there were proxies and with enzyme replacement therapy programs, for instance. And I really understood the value of bringing the patient voice and patient perspective into a drug development. And in doing so, we could develop a program for Sanfilippo syndrome and a few others that were really patient-focused, but not, as a gadget, something nice to have, but as a business choice. And I mean, no company of consumer goods, for instance, would go into development of a program without careful and deep recognition of customers' needs. But most of the time, when it's about the health of an individual, we would rely heavily on clinicians' perspectives, which is absolutely essential, but maybe not enough on patients' perspective. And what is important to understand is that a clinician, an investigator doing a clinical study or even a natural history study to better understand the progression of a disease will necessarily work mostly in a discrete fashion when he or she meets with patients at the hospital in a clinical setting. But when we have such complex diseases as we have in the adult and pediatric populations with multisystemic diseases most of the time, very severe diseases with high unmet medical needs, it's extremely important also to capture what the disease means on an everyday life basis when the patient is at home or elsewhere, and to make sure that what we will measure during a natural history study and a clinical development really makes sense for the patients also, and not only for the clinicians. And that's all the most important, that at the end of the journey, when you talk with health technology assessment bodies and those who will then decide on how much they pay for your drug, they will come back to that notion. And so when I develop a treatment, I like to also enter into early dialogue with the paying authorities, because the sooner you take into consideration the expectations of the patients and the needs that you want to be able to bring a solution to, the better it is, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You've said a lot of great things, and I want to dig in on the role of the patient and advocacy organizations a little bit, and just flag the regulatory expectations as something to come back to in a little bit. But you're making an excellent point that the role of the patient is, it seems a lot of times in companies there's an acknowledgement in rare disease, we get that it has to be part of it, but you often see it isolated to maybe it supports enrollment in trials, or it's going to be really important in an advisory committee setting or something like that. But you're highlighting here that this is critical throughout the entire process from beginning to end. And so if you could share a little color on even thinking about the early discovery and even ideation stages when you're trying to define what good looks like and what a profile for successful medicine looks like, making sure it's really embedded there as well.
Yes, so you're making a good point. Maybe too often. So first, there has been a big progress because I would say that maybe 15, 20 years ago, you would hardly hear about patient engagement in the companies. And then things started to change, and several companies adopted this belief that patients needed to be engaged. But sometimes, maybe, they did it in a sort of press the button approach where they would address the patient communities or patient advocacy groups only when they were in need of them, like when, as you said, they would need to enroll patients or have their support at a time of marketing approval evaluation, for instance. On my side, I see patient engagement rather as a continuum for different reasons. One being that if you place yourself in the shoes of a patient or a family, you have to realize that you live with this disease, whatever it is, every day, every night. And so when a company comes to you or when a clinician comes to you with a new potential therapeutic option, these therapeutic options have to be positioned towards what the patients and the families have already experienced in the past. And so if there has been no attempt at anything, that's one setting, but most of the time you will be in a situation where these patient organizations have already been confronted to companies asking them to provide support. But if you are still there as a drug developer, it precisely means that there remains high unmet medical needs. And so you have to deal with the expectations of the patients, but also with their disappointment, maybe their fatigue, or even their reluctance to enter into a new study or develop a new hope for something that maybe will end nowhere. And so this is also about respecting that matter of fact and engage them early enough so that they understand what you aim at doing from a scientific and medical standpoint, but so that they can also express what you as a drug or therapy developer need to address with your treatment. And it can go as far as endpoint determination, of course. So we all have many biomarkers, whether they are validated or not to evaluate our diseases. But it's also important to really validate that what you will be observing in a positive, let's say, a biomarker evolution also reflects in some functional outcome or functional benefit for the patient. So if you take the example of neurodegenerative diseases, do the family really expect that a child with, let's say, a 7 or 8 years life expectancy will go to university or will go to, I don't know, Harvard or the MIT? No, this is not what they expect. They expect something probably more accessible and more reasonable. But if you do not capture that, you may end up with, let's say, only cognitive endpoints where quality of life or the ability of getting more autonomy would be the most important factors for the patients and the caregivers. So now I intervene in the space of organic acidemias, which are not neurodegenerative diseases. But again, we are facing with methylmalonic acidemia, which is what we work on at Genespire, a multisystemic disease with a vast spectrum of symptoms. And so it's important to have a protocol with the relevant biomarkers that make sense in this disease. but also to look at what would be the most important in terms of caregivers' preferences.
Yep. Yep.
And this is where I think the natural history studies are extremely important and maybe would not be designed today as they were designed in the past, because today we can really develop, again, multi-stakeholder based approaches, and we should start as soon as when we want to best characterize the disease.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, what's coming through very clearly, and as you're speaking about this, is how all of these considerations keep us focused on what the end objective is, which is ultimately access to a medicine that has a meaningful effect on the patients who can benefit from it. Oftentimes in startup small companies, this happens in larger companies too, you can get overly focused on some of the near-term or intermediate milestones, so getting something into the clinic. Getting even approval is not the goal, right? And so talk a little bit about that, and even within the experience that you're having within companies, keeping the organization focused on the right long-term objective and making sure that the decision-making advances that end, which is challenging just given how long the process can be.
Yes, so that's right. But even in a small company or in a small biotech, in a small biotech company, I believe that investing in patient engagement is a very good and rewarding investment, because again, it helps you designing the right protocols, of course, in coordination with the regulatory authorities, who themselves have changed a lot over the last 2 decades and are paying a great attention to what patient organizations tell them or educate them even about. And so this close interaction with patient organizations does not allow only to get them understanding what's at stake, contributing to your reflections and to your business decisions or scientific decisions. It also helps, of course, when time comes to enroll, because they have been involved, they know what it's about. Your program as a therapy developer is also their program because they've put energy into it. And again, as I said, around this notion of respect, the time of a patient, the time of a family is very reduced actually, because you have to deal with, usually we speak of very, very severe diseases, right? So the burden is very high. So each time they contribute to your program is also an investment of theirs. And so in doing so, your program becomes their program. And so when it's time to enroll, when it's time to evaluate the results, when it's time to transition, for instance, from phase 1-2 with a more exploratory, let's say, perspective into a confirmatory phase 3 study, pivotal study, you still have them along your side. And so that's a sort of backbone, actually, that we should have. And again, I think that investment done pretty early in the process can only be beneficial to both parties.
Yep. There have been...
And sorry, to your point of, it's not just about getting a drug approved. And so, as I told you yesterday, this reminds me of an anecdote. So I was starting in the gene therapy space, attending a conference, and I heard someone say, you know, when you get your drug approved, this is when it all starts. So I was like, oh my God, is it really so hard? But actually, the bridge between having a drug approved and having a drug paid for is very, very complex. So while we have a pretty strong convergence between the regulatory systems all along the way up to the marketing approval, of course, there are differences, but Globally, I would say that the convergence is pretty good between the different jurisdictions. But when it comes to the payment, as everyone knows, it's a country-by-country battle. And so it's a very, very intensive part that you need to take care of, a very difficult one. And here again, the patient advocacy groups support can only be beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd love to spend a few minutes on this because it's, as you point out, it's critical, and it has to be going along in parallel with all the important work the field is doing to reduce costs, improve the efficiency of the development process. But not only is the part post-approval highly fragmented, there aren't really any mature reimbursement systems that recognize potential long-term value of these medicines, where the systems in place they tie reimbursement to the administration of the dose, and many of the things that we're talking about that you're working on, you have a single point of administration, potentially decades worth of benefit. And in the rare disease space, there's an intermediate solution of negotiating to try to get as much value recognition in those first 5 years, but certainly for the long-term benefit of these types of medicines, there should be ways to have reasonable value recognition over a longer period of time that would require real innovation on the reimbursement front. Do you think, are you doing anything in this area? Is there more that you think the field in general should be doing? Are there places that we can start to make progress there?
Yeah, so I think that if we are not yet completely sure about the payment models that would be the best ones, it's probably because we don't have enough products approved yet. So we had very big hopes for the gene therapy space, probably several disappointments. And I think that if we had had more products, then the ones who are supposed to pay for these products would also have progressed faster. So it's a little bit question of the chicken and egg. And I still believe that the more products we will have, and the more that question will find solutions. However, I heard yesterday a presentation where the speakers were highlighting the fact that, so it's in a different area, it's in the cell therapy space, but that the ecosystem was still immature with respect to manufacturing. And I would say that it's probably the same in the gene therapy space. So as long as we will face big challenges in terms of manufacturing, that will slow the development of gene therapies, and that will slow their approvals, and that will slow their payments. So I'm pretty happy now that I am the CEO of an immune-shielded lentiviral company, because with the technology we are developing at Genespire, which has an immunogenicity profile, that's one thing, a very good profile, but also a very good transgene expression. I believe that we will be able to progress with less manufacturing pressure in terms of the yields that we need to obtain. And so I'm very hopeful and enthusiastic about this. But essentially, we need to really progress on the front of manufacturing to get higher doses, higher quantities, and be able to have more investment and more clinical studies to prove that gene therapy is really a very good approach. Mm-hmm. And for the time being, what I can only recommend is, again, to enter into early dialogue with those who will pay for our drugs if our drug is approved one day. Yeah. And to interact with them, again, quite soon in the process, and to do it all along the development.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. For whether it's on the regulatory side or on the payer side, this is an understatement, there's very high political, global disruption, potential for the U.S. in its role as a global leader in some of these areas to change. And does this present an opportunity for Europe to take more of a leadership role in these areas? And is there anything that you'd like to see?
Yes. So yeah, maybe so. So I've been working on both continents almost since the beginning of my adventure in the gene therapy space, and I have always developed programs simultaneously in Europe and in the US. And so I have always believed that Europe is definitely a great place to develop treatments. So it's not always easy because we have a fragmented territory in a certain way if you compare with the US, but we have the European Union and again a pretty widespread regulation all out Europe. Even with the UK having left the Union, we know that the MHRA is a very diligent organization, and so maybe I should not do that, but I'm advocating for EU and the UK actually. And the science is very good. The clinical sites are ready. Quite often they are less expensive than the United States or Japan, for instance. And so what I would really love to see is more US investors coming to Europe, because I think we can develop programs with a higher productivity, let's say, for the same amount of money. And the problem for biotech companies in Europe is most of the time that when they reach a certain level of development, they lack funding. So if we could have US investors coming into our companies sooner and develop more close relationships with the business environment, American business environment, that would be great. Then on what happens in the US at the moment, I will not comment, but I just hope that things will settle and that we will be able to pursue our developments.
Yeah, no, there's so many beautiful examples of global collaboration in rare disease gene therapy development. We need to see more of that moving forward.
Yes, and in gene therapy, we often have rare diseases to tackle. And so, as you know, the space of rare diseases is very international, and this is not an obsession, but back to the patient organizations, they are extremely international by nature. Mm-hmm. So when you have the diagnosis of a rare disease in your family, very rapidly you end up with talking with, I don't know, a Taiwanese family, a Japanese family, a Brazilian family. So we are very international, and so are the company normally.
Yeah, I think that's really important.
The companies, sorry.
Just one more question, and then if we have a minute or two, would be happy to open it up to any questions from the broader audience. But you spoke a lot about expectation setting across all stakeholders, with regulators, with patients, caregivers, advocacy groups. And the gene therapy space has come a tremendous distance over the past 10 years, and there's been a lot of really exciting progress, life-changing data across multiple areas, multiple approved products. As you look 10 years ahead, and being mindful of the expectations, but if you're optimistic and looking forward, any things that you feel really good about, or that you want to make sure that we're focused on, so that we do see on that the next 10 years for the field?
So what I'm optimistic about is that, as I said, I think the manufacturing challenge remains quite high. And but what I see at the same time is that there is an increasing level of quality in the CDMOs, increasing levels of financing for the good CDMOs, and so that should that will certainly trigger innovation breakthroughs with the potential to really unlock the perspectives of gene therapy. And so in 10 years from now, I hope we'll have more products approved and many more programs under development with a high chance of success.
Super. That's a great way to end. I think we probably don't have enough time for questions, but please join me in thanking Karen, and I'm sure she'd be happy to answer questions afterwards.
Thank you so much.